Hello, I'm Edgar Allan Poe. Who are you?
I'm Grip.
This is Grip the Raven. I'm going to read you a story that's close to my heart. It's called A Raven Named Grip. How a bird inspired two famous writers, Charles Dickens and Edgar Allan Poe. It's written by Marilyn Singer and illustrated by Edwin Fotheringham. A Raven Named Grip.
Looks pretty cute.
You would say that.
Nice feather.
Charlie, Katie, and Mammy Dickens were not fond of Grip the Raven. The bird chased them around the house. She bit their ankles. She chipped off paint to eat. But the children's father adored the Raven. He was Charles Dickens, the most famous writer in all of Britain. He had already published 4 popular novels, first as installments in magazines and then as books. Even Queen Victoria was a big fan. In Victorian England, people had many pets besides cats and dogs, especially birds. Today, it is illegal to keep wild birds, but back then, people caught or purchased them to keep in cages. Wealthier folks sometimes bought exotic species such as parrots or minas. Charles Dickens chose ravens. But in 1841, when he was working on his next book, Barnaby Rudge, Dickens decided to make Grip a character in it. The main character was a man who wasn't very clever, but he had a pet raven that was. Dickens' descriptions of how the bird behaved were accurate and amusing. Ravens can imitate human speech, and Barnaby's raven talked a lot. Dickens' raven could speak too. Her favorite expression was, "Hello, old girl."
Hello, girl.
It was the last thing she said before she died. The lead paint chips had done her in. Charles Dickens was very sad. His children were not. During the Victorian era, it was popular to have a pet stuffed when it died, so Dickens sent the raven to a taxidermist. Then he hung Grip in a glass case above his desk to keep him company while he wrote, and he got another raven, which he also named Grip. Mammy described Grip too as mischievous and impudent. Perhaps that bird was a leg biter as well. Grip 2 was followed by Grip 3. Henry Dickens, another of Charles's 10 children, said that this raven was so bold that it bullied their mastiff, Turk. The bird would stride up to the large dog's bowl, and Turk would turn back off as Grip ate the best bits of food. The raven could also crack window panes with its beak and swallow keys, then spit them back up, much to Dickens' amusement. Boston. Because he was so popular, the author received an invitation to visit America and talk about his books. His wife, Catherine, came along, but she was worried about leaving the children. To comfort her on the long journey, Charles Dickens' friend, Daniel McLeese, painted a picture of Charlie, Katie, Mammy, and the new baby, Walter. He put Grip 2 in the painting as well. Catherine gave the picture a special place in every hotel room where she and Charles stayed.
I look good.
Yes, you do. Before they got to Philadelphia, Dickens got a note from an American author, who wanted to meet him. The man had read Barnaby Rudge and liked it. He was amused by the raven. He'd even written a good review in the Saturday Evening Post, a highly respected newspaper. Though in it he said that it would have been even better book if the raven had croaked throughout the Fortell gloom. The American writer was not famous yet. His name was Edgar Allan Poe. And he was rather poor. He was having a hard time trying to support himself and his wife by writing mysteries and horror stories. I do what I can. He showed up at Dickens' hotel room in a plain suit and mended gloves. Charles Dickens greeted him in a velvet vest with a gold chain and a green necktie with a diamond clasp. Poe was most likely noticed the painting of Grip and the Dickens children. He was delighted to discover that the bird in Barnaby Rudge was based on Dickens' own pet. The two men talked about books and poems. Dickens promised to try and get Poe's work published in Great Britain. He did not succeed. Poe's stories were published in many popular American magazines, but he still wasn't famous. Throw me a bone. Oh, there I go. He needed a hit, and according to the most Poe scholars, Grip the Raven provided it. Thank you.
Don't mention it.
Several years after meeting Dickens, Poe put the bird into a spooky poem called The Raven. In the poem, a raven mysteriously appears and reminds the narrator of his lost love, which drives the man insane. But this bird is not a big talker. Throughout the poem, it croaks just one word.
Nevermore.
The Raven was published in 1845 in the New York Evening Mirror, a weekly newspaper that covered arts and literature as well as the local news. It was an instant success, and it made Edgar Allan Poe a celebrity. Hold your applause. He was recognized everywhere. Children would follow him in the street, flapping and croaking until the poet would spin around and say, "Nevermore!" Do it all the time, I love it. Then the children would run off, squealing. Yet for all his newfound fame, Poe was still poor. Come on. The poem earned him hardly any money at all, though it became and still remains one of the best-known poems in the world. Charles Dickens outlived Poe and wrote more renowned books, including his most beloved work, A Christmas Carol. The painting of his children, Grip 2, hangs in the Charles Dickens Museum, the London house where he once lived. Next to the picture is a stuffed raven in a glass case. But it isn't Grip. It's a bird that was owned by Bransby Williams, an actor who often performed scenes from Dickens' books on stage. So where is Charles Dickens' raven? After Dickens died, Grip was bought by a gentleman who would later become the mayor of London. Then the bird passed from one collector to another until at last he was purchased by Colonel Richard Gimble, a pilot, professor, and department store founder who had a treasury of rare books, particularly ones by Charles Dickens and Edgar Allan Poe. Gimble was from Philadelphia, the city where Dickens and Poe had met. In his will, he left his entire collection of Poe's work to the Philadelphia Free Library. Along with that, he donated Grip. Today, anyone who visits the library can see the raven who inspired two of the world's best-known authors. If you close your eyes, you can picture her chasing Charlie, Katie, and Mammy around the room and spiting ankles, while their famous father dreamed of his next book. And you can imagine another group of children flapping and croaking behind a poor and talented poet, then scattering like a flock of birds when he whirled around and spoke the magic word.
Nevermore.
More Grips. Oh my gosh. The story continues. Very nice. There you are.